Hideo Kojima is, putting it mildly, an odd individual. However, regardless of how you feel about him, I think most people would agree that his approach to games is certainly unique, and he has certainly had a major impact on the industry from the time he first created Metal Gear. Over time, his games became more elaborate and certainly more cinematic and story-focused. Playing the first Metal Gear Solid, I never really thought about just how many cutscenes were in the game since it was such a phenomenal game. Since then, his games have gotten more bombastic and have included more and more, well, weird things. That's not always a bad thing, but it's not like he always has the best justifications for them, even from a narrative standpoint. In Metal Gear Solid 5, Quiet runs around in battle fatigue pants and a bikini top, and the explanation was that she's able to breathe through her skin via photosynthesis. Of course, in Metal Gear Solid 3, we had The End, who was a sniper that had the same ability, but he wore full camo that accomplished the same thing, but let's not get hung up on details. Kojima explaining, look, the actress was hot, and I like having attractive and sexy women in my games, is really the obvious explanation and the one that we all instinctively know is the real reason, but that doesn't really work from a story perspective. Similarly, it's the same sort of reason why Yoko Taro came up with Kaine's backstory about wearing lingerie, because she's possessed by a shade and needs to keep him suppressed through sunlight. Of course, there's also the explanation that the replicant system screwed up and made her female with some extra parts that caused her to be an object of ridicule and wanted to emphasize her femininity, but none of that is in Nier itself, and it's mostly explained through other media that you have to read or find online somewhere. Either way, while it makes sense narratively, it's also because, let's be real, Yoko Taro also loves having hot female characters in his games, and we're all grateful for it. Well, most of us are. There are some out there who hate it, but I don't really know what to say to them.
Why are you gay?
I mean, really, Kaine and Quiet are prime examples of where people will say that video games just objectify women and it's all for the male gaze, blah, blah, blah. I actually remember my wife asking about Quiet years ago, and when I gave the lore explanation, she just rolled her eyes and said it sounded like the dumbest and contrived reason she's ever heard. Again, she's not wrong. The lore makes no sense in light of Metal Gear Solid 3, but whatever. Kojima is going to Kojima, and we're all here for it. Yet, if you thought the plot of Metal Gear Solid 5 was weird enough with the concept of diseases tied to speaking different languages and all that, then we really had no idea what he had planned with Death Stranding. Things got really weird and goofy with that game. I mean, I don't think anyone expected a game where you had babies stuck in incubators strapped to Norman Reedus' chest while he traveled across America making deliveries like Japanese delivery man out in the middle of nowhere, and yet, that's exactly what we got. We also got a star-studded cast with Norman Reedus, Lea Seydoux, Margaret Qualley, Guillermo del Toro, Lindsay Wagner, both present-day and a de-aged version based on her appearance circa the Bionic Woman, which is an excellent choice if I do say so myself. And of course, Troy Baker, because presumably Nolan North wasn't available. I mean, if it's not one, it's the other, right? And to be fair, Troy Baker is amazing as Hicks, so who cares? Then, of course, there were all these celebrity cameos Kojima collected, like Conan O'Brien, who played various side characters in the game. All of it was a very odd and very polarizing experience. You either derided Death Stranding as nothing more than a glorified walking simulator, or you loved the game for Kojima taking such huge risks by making a game with such weird supernatural elements, a narrative about making human connections instead of remaining isolated, a great soundtrack on top of all the songs contributed by various artists, and a wild and even heart-wrenching conclusion, all told on the back of a walking simulator. Building your own structures and even helping contribute to other players' structures, which could also show up in your game, was a nice touch and really helped underscore that idea of helping others and being connected. Ever since then, there has still been a thriving community online that has loved this game for years. So when Death Stranding 2 was announced and then released, those rabid fans of the first game pounced on it and devoured it just like they did the first one, myself included. I couldn't wait to jump back in and see how Sam and Lou had fared since the events of the first game. I won't dig into the story too much, but it starts out, once again, with some of the most gorgeous scenery shots I've ever seen in a video game. And the transition from real life to the in-game graphics is so smooth and seamless, it's hard to pinpoint just where that shift happened. All of this happens while -61 by Woodkid plays. I had no idea who this guy was, but he contributed several songs to the game, and I really can't place my finger on it, but his music fits the environment of this game so well. This song and To the Wilder are two tracks that I have yet to grow tired of hearing through the in-game music player. Again, Kojima has many songs contributed by many artists, and you can get an in-game music player which can play all of the various songs you collect through the game. In fact, we have the ability to listen to the song Death Stranding by Churches that plays at the end of the first game, which every time I hear it, I am taken back to that feeling I had completing the first game. Just an amazing experience finishing DS1 and then hearing that play, especially when you take into consideration the full weight of the message. There's that song and another called Nightmares that is also a great earworm. I just really like Lauren Mayberry's vocals on those. Also, like Conan O'Brien, the band actually serves as NPCs at one of the many shelters in the game, specifically the animal shelter. Anyway, the game starts out simply enough with Sam and Lou returning back to the shelter, and we're treated to a montage of Sam taking care of Lou, and I've got to say, this is one of my favorite scenes in the game. I know, it's just a minor little scene, but it sets up so well the relationship that is developed between these two. I also love just how accurate it is, with Lou passing out at one point and Sam having to pick her up and put her in her bed like carrying a limp rag doll. And for those of you who don't have kids, this is exactly what it's like. Sometimes your kid just blacks out in a chair or somewhere, and you gotta carry them ever so carefully and put them down and hope they don't wake up. Watching this brought back so many memories of when my kids were newborns and toddlers, and just how much I loved moments like this. There were many times when I had rocked them to sleep, or they had passed out after eating, or before finishing eating, and rather than putting them in their crib or bed, I just went and laid down on the couch and let them either sleep in my arms or on my chest, and many times I'd end up passing out with them, usually on a Sunday after church after lunch. Best time for a nap, to be honest. Anyway, rather than just an excuse to reminisce about the joys of being a dad with small kids, both of whom have outgrown those sorts of things, I just wanted to praise the writing here for capturing that so well. It also helps us get invested for when Fragile shows up, sends Sam on a mission while promising to babysit Lou, and then everything goes to hell, starting a tragedy and a chain of events that alters Sam's life forever. And that's about all I'm going to say about that. I'll touch on more of the story again in a bit. First, let's deal with the gameplay. Did you play Death Stranding 1? Good. You'll know how to play the second one. I realize that sounds shallow and trite, but it really is that simple. Death Stranding 2 is almost identical to the first one in terms of gameplay, so the learning curve for returning players is basically non-existent. The good thing is, much of the gameplay has been streamlined as well. You get access to vehicles much sooner, which some have seen as making the game too easy. After all, where's the fun in not having to haul everything across the map on foot? Alright, this time you're reconnecting Mexico and Australia. Who doesn't want to haul hundreds of kilos of cargo? Which I'm not sure if that's 5 pounds or 3 tons. It's metric, so there's no way to know. Nobody does. Across the Australian continent while dealing with BTs. There's new BTs as well, so that's fun, and you can always kill them to your heart's content to farm crystals, just like in the first game. Destroying large ones will clear the area of all BTs for a while too, just like in the first game. Did I mention that this game is pretty much the same gameplay-wise as the first one? Because it is, but it just feels like it plays better. Combat can still be cheesed if you have the right weapons, and the more you increase your star rankings with various shelters, the better equipment you unlock. Anyway, getting back to using vehicles earlier, I've seen a lot of people complain about this making the game too easy. Then again, I've also seen people who claim to be true Death Stranding players and that the only real way to play the game is to play on offline mode, meaning no access to other player structures, and playing it on brutal difficulty. Then it really feels like you're playing a video game, or you're really living the experience Sam would have. Of course, I just have to ask, did you miss the entire point of the first game about making connections and helping others? Did you miss the fact that The entire theme of Death Stranding 2 is continuing to make connections and helping one another. Did you miss the fact that the entire core of the gameplay loop is unlocking new things that you can construct to not only make your life, but the lives of others easier? Now, you can always limit some of what you see in your own map, but one of the things I loved was seeing where others had put maybe a zip line or two, upgrading theirs, and then establishing my own network of zip lines to accomplish some of the more difficult time-based deliveries. Also enjoyable was seeing the random bridges to nowhere. Seems like Ozzy wrote a song about something similar. I enjoyed finding lost cargo I didn't need because I had already maxed out the facility it belonged to, and then entrusting it to someone else to help them max out a facility a little easier. I liked finding areas in my map that were a pain to traverse, and then building pathways and structures, hoping that maybe they'll show up for someone else so they'll have an easier go of it. That's the entire point of these games and one of the key gameplay mechanics. Why anyone would go out of their way to make their lives more difficult just to give themselves a challenge makes no sense to me. I already have a full-time job, a family, and other responsibilities. My life is already challenging enough to manage. Why on God's green earth would I want my hobby to make me suffer too? This is like the From Software sexuals who decry anyone from using things like summons in Elden Ring, and that only real men play the game with no gear and basically a wooden stick and using a left-handed Guitar Hero controller.
Alright bro, I'm gonna help you out so you can actually play like a real man. Let me see that controller real quick. Thanks bro. I'm just gonna take off some of the stuff that you got equipped. Alright, you should be good now. And can you put your arm out real quick?
Okay.
Thanks. Ah, what the f? Yep. Now you're just gonna put this on, you should be good.
Man, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, isn't this fun? Yeah, it's a lot more fun, isn't it now?
Aw, man, I don't like this.
Yeah, now you can actually have a real challenge, you know? Because life isn't hard enough already, you know? Why not add another fucking challenge, right?
Bro, this is supposed to be a video game. This shit feel like a fucking Amazon factory job now. What the fuck is this?
Yeah, isn't it fun not using any of the fun mechanics in the game?
Bro, I'm not having fun, nigga. I was having fun before.
Bro, why are you acting like you ain't got 60 hours to fight one fucking boss, bro? Just quit your fucking job. Be fucking homeless.
I don't want to do this.
Play the game how you want, but we really need to stop the, as a real gamer, I refuse to use anyone else's structures. Get a life. Nobody's impressed by your need to be a sweaty tryhard who has nothing else in life to point to as an accomplishment. I don't mean to be harsh, but my goodness, tone it down a notch. Some of the newer features include ramps you can use to jump vehicles over large distances or down steep cliffs, spiked tires for better navigation in the mountains, level 2 roads which increase durability and allow for faster travel around the continent, mines and monorails which allow you to farm a ton of materials for crafting roads and other structures, and even the ability to capture large BTs which you can use as tar-covered Pokemon. I'm not exaggerating either. Whenever you end up in those fights with large BTs in the huge pools of tar, you can actually weaken them and use a capture grenade, something you unlock through the story and upgrading facilities, to then summon them later. And when I say you can capture any large BT, I mean any. For me though, there's one you can get later through a particular order which allows you to summon what is essentially a giant whale, which basically grants you an instant win. It's not instant, but it will kick the ever-loving dog crap out of whatever BT you happen to be fighting. You can use your own weapons to help speed things along, but I much preferred the Ken Watanabe approach and let them take each other out.
Let them fight.
Even better is that the music that plays during these bits is by Kunio Miyauchi, who composed music for Ultraman back in the 60s. Definitely has that old school kaiju monster feel to it, and I love it. Some people have claimed that it got old hearing it every time you summoned one, but honestly, I loved it. Other than that, and maybe some new weapons for the sequel, just about everything else is the same. Sam is given a main order to connect a new node on the chiral network, and then there are various other standard orders and suborders you can get to increase your ESG and social credit score. I mean, to increase the number of likes you get from each facility. There are little drips and drabs of story following the completion of the main orders, and then you have all these standard orders that unlock, and you can either do them all right away or save them for later. You can also, if you desire, take the time to rebuild roads, reactivate mines, and take your time building up the relationships with the various porters to unlock better gear before taking on the next main order. There is sort of a point of no return around Chapter 9, but really that's just because it disables the fast travel feature. Alright, you get to use a vehicle called the DHV Magellan. If you can't remember the name of the ship, don't worry, they'll say the full name every time they bring it up, over and over again.
The DHV Magellan, the DHV Magellan, the DHV Magellan, the DHV Magellan,
With the DHV Magellan.
the DHV Magellan.
The DHV Magellan.
The DHV Magellan.
You can use the ship to fast travel with any deliveries, but you'll only get a fraction of the likes you would get otherwise, so I don't recommend it if you can avoid it. Again, using the truck to carry multiple orders makes this less of a problem, though if you're going to do that, just turn in one order at a facility at a time, since the game locks your progression to no more than one single star's progress per turn-in, so after a certain amount, you're not getting anything extra and it's just wasted progress. Anyway, having said that, once you hit the end of Chapter 9, the DHV Magellan...
With the DHV Magellan.
The DHV Magellan.
The DHV Magellan.
The DHV Magellan.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it.
won't be able to fast travel for plot reasons, and you'll basically be in the end stretch of the narrative, which takes about 5 to 6 hours to complete. Once you finish the game, you'll unlock the final chapter, which is basically a free roam, which allows you to finish any facilities and orders you have left to do. I'll come back to this in a minute, because for me, this was the part of the game that actually just about ruined my experience. So, as I mentioned earlier, Death Stranding 1 had no small shortage of celebrity appearances and celebrity cast members. The original cast is back again, though it's obvious some people couldn't fully be here, but at least allowed their likeness to be used. In particular, I'm thinking of Mama/Lochna, played by Margaret Qualley. Qualley was one of the best things in Death Stranding 1, not only because Mama and Lochna were just interesting characters, but, I mean, who doesn't like Margaret Qualley? So, I was pretty disappointed that her role in here was sort of just mentioned in passing, but her character didn't have any lines. My guess is that she was just included as a throwback to the first game, and so players would know what happened to her after the first game. As far as new characters, most are relegated to the various facilities. Woodkid, I think, is the mechanic, and there are various other cameos I won't bother listing out. The main additions are Rainey, played by Shioli Kutsuna, whom you may recognize as Yukio in Deadpool, and George Miller of Mad Max and Happy Feet fame. I know, I still can't believe the man was responsible for both, and Ellie Fanning. There's another actor named Luca Marinelli that plays a recurring character, but I've never seen anything he's in, so this is my only experience seeing his work, but he does a great job. Troy Baker is back hamming it up as Higgs, and it's glorious, and even more over the top this time. I should mention that character names are just as silly in this game as in the first one, with new characters, such as the guy who navigates the ship through the tar currents, named Tarman, the Asian girl who causes reverse timefall rain, named Rainy, and the most irritating character, the therapist trapped inside the body of a doll named, wait for it, Dollman. Very creative, these names. To be fair, Dollman is only irritating because he says too much when you're on the overworld, commenting on things that we can already see, like if you dropped cargo or got injured. I don't need the wooden therapist to state the obvious. Though there is one line of dialogue that was actually useful.
By the way, I get the feeling there may be a long cutscene in the near future. You ready for that? Are you sure?
This is like when Final Fantasy XIV warns you about extended portions of upcoming cutscenes. Good way to warn us to buckle up. Anyway, the ridiculously named cast does a good job communicating the story, and the acting is enjoyable. Sam is still Sam, albeit a little more traumatized after the beginning of the game. The end of the story is just as over the top and ridiculous as the first game, and part of it feels like End of Evangelion, which, depending on your perspective, is either really good or really stupid.
This video is the biggest load of hoo-ha I've ever seen. Why do you insist we watch this stupid thing?
Am I the only one who understands the complexities of this ambitious cinematic masterpiece? This movie isn't stupid! You're stupid!
I don't want to spoil too much, but at one point my wife asked, "Why are you fighting each other with electric guitars?" I'll tell you all now the same thing I told her. I don't know. I really don't know. It's just Kojima. There you go. It's weird. It's fun. There's no rational reason for it to be that way, but it is that way, and you're either fully on board with it and along for the ride, or you think it's absolutely idiotic and convinces you that Kojima is nothing but a hack with nobody to tell him no. For those of us who have been following him for years, it's all baked into the cake, and really, nothing surprises us anymore. It's part of the charm. Your mileage may vary. The ending also has very strong similarities to the end of Metal Gear Solid 4, which I thought was a nice nod to that game. Again, it's a wild ride, and you'll either love it or hate it. The main criticism that many have is that much of it feels like a retread of the plot of the first game, including a character that fills a similar role to Clifford Unger. However, Kojima did something similar with Metal Gear Solid 2, and there's a similar philosophical discussion near the end of this game that is reminiscent in tone, though not necessarily substance, as the conversation with the Patriots in MGS2. It didn't bother me too much since I think the differences outweigh the similarities, but I understand the criticism and I think it's completely fair. As for the post-game, as I said, part of it nearly ruined the experience for me. Why is that? Well, honestly, it's just because I was trying to complete the Platinum Trophy and it is an absolute slog. Remember, the way you increase your rank with the various shelters is through deliveries and likes. Deliveries with more cargo usually yield more likes, and so those are the ones you prioritize. However, there are certain facilities that just don't have that many high volume orders, which means you end up having to do a lot more orders to get there. On top of that, going from 4 to 5 stars for some locations is even worse, requiring multiple thousand likes to get there. Even worse, there are certain facilities that have story-related suborders. Well, more accurate, I should say side story related, since they are unique to the facility itself. In particular, there's the Ghost Hunter, the Adventurer, and Mr. Impossible, the latter only unlocking after completing the game. Pretty sure none of his lost cargo shows up before then. The typical pattern consists of turning in enough orders to get to roughly 80 to 90% of a star, resting somewhere to get a message from them about something they need you to do, which unlocks a new suborder, which you then complete to begin making progress again, and then turning in more orders to get almost all the way through another star, rest, lather, rinse, repeat. Still, keep in mind that the more progress you make, the more orders to progress the next star, and so on and so forth. This becomes exceptionally annoying in the 4 to 5 star range when turning in multiple orders and getting over 1,000 likes or more looks like it barely moves the needle. The Adventurer was one of my most hated ones, where I turn in multiple orders and finish with just barely a sliver left to hit the cap for the final suborder.
I'm sorry! No! 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 Why? Why? Do you really hate me that bad?
I had to wander around looking for lost cargo, hoping it would be enough to give me enough progress since all available orders for that location were on cooldown. Fortunately, I found one and got it taken care of, but it was still aggravating. By the time I had cleared all the other trophies except the final one, maxing all connections to 5 stars, I had accrued probably another 60 to 70 hours. It was no longer fun anymore doing the same orders over and over, just trying to make a sliver of progress. Then it was time for my final order, the big daddy of all orders, or the big boss of all orders, Mr. Impossible's Impossible Challenge. This one had a 50-minute time limit, which required you to collect one piece of cargo each from the 7 bandit/survivalist camps around the map. To get S rank, you needed to finish in 45 minutes, and all cargo had to have 5% damage average or less. Keep in mind, this is to finish the 5th star and get the platinum. I could have risked using the DHV Magellan and fast traveled around the map, but I wanted full marks for the delivery. So, how would I do this? Well, the good thing about this is that you can actually wipe out a camp before taking on the order, and they don't respawn. So I went around the map going from the easiest camp to the hardest and wiped out every single base. Then I left my truck at the F7 distribution center, beach jumped across the map to go pick up the order, built a transponder outside the facility, teleported back, hopped in my truck, turned on my music player, and then drove all around the map picking up cargo with nothing standing in my way. This felt like the biggest victory lap ever. Once I turned this in, I would finish my platinum trophy and I would finally be done with everything. I did it fast enough, in fact, that even though about 3 days had passed in-game, it still wasn't enough time for anyone to respawn at the camps. I literally had nothing stopping me as I listened to the various songs from the game. I turned in my order, the trophy popped, and I got my effusive praise from the shelter.
Well done.
Then I hopped back in the DHV Magellan, teleported back to Sam's shelter back in Mexico, and took him home. And for all we know, Death Stranding 2 is the last game in the series, or if there is another, Kojima says he won't be involved. And honestly, I hope there isn't a sequel. I think the story ends on a satisfying enough conclusion, and even though a certain scene points to the potential for a sequel with another character, I don't think it's necessary. Not for Sam, anyway. For me, Sam's story needs to end here with him being able to be at home and at peace. After everything that happens in the beginning and end of the story, he deserves it. So overall, I had a blast with Death Stranding 2 up to a point. I think the main story and everything up through that is better executed and streamlined this time around, which makes it more enjoyable for me, but I'm not a sweaty tryhard. However, if you're like me and you insist on going for a platinum trophy, which fortunately doesn't require completing every order on hardest difficulty, just be warned, it's a massive slog and that it may sour your experience of the game over time. Still, that victory lap for the last order felt so good it almost made the journey to that point worth it, just knowing I would never have to do it again. Almost. So, if you love the first game and you want to see the narrative conclusion, I'd say it's worth it. Otherwise, just watch a playthrough for the narrative if you like the story, but not the gameplay of the first. Alright, after almost 200 hours in this game, 190 to be exact, I'm finally done. Gonna chill out with a relaxing game like Wu Chang Fallen Feathers, and I'll probably give my thoughts on that at some point. Anyway, let me know what you guys thought of Death Stranding 2 and how it compares to the first one, and if you preferred one over the other. You all take care, and I'll talk to you again soon.